So I want to talk about self-worth, right? And when we think about weight loss, that's not really where we start. Usually we go right to food. But until we can actually recognize and treat ourselves as we deserve, we can't even start to think about food. It's why when I wrote my book, step 1 was self-worth, step 2 was dealing with overwhelm, and it wasn't until a month in my program that we even start talking about food. And it's section 3 in my book. We're basically at the end. So self-worth is the very most important thing. And let's talk about why. So for me, as a child, my parents were really busy. My dad grew all our food and both of them worked full time. And this meant that they didn't really have a lot of time for me. And what I took away from that with the eyes and lens of a child is that I had to work really hard to show people that I deserved time and attention. And this showed up again and again through my life, right? I worked really hard in school. I worked really hard in my job. I worked really hard in my marriage. And all of this work, this overgiving, this being perfect, this trying really hard, this showing everyone how much I deserve to be paid attention to, meant that I was exhausted. It meant that I didn't have any time for myself, right? So I would be so tired at the end of the day that I would collapse, that I had cortisol. So stress causes us to have cortisol, which shuts down your metabolism, right? All of those things meant that no matter what I did, even if I did manage to put, restrict food on my to-do list, I'd hit a day where it was too hard and I wouldn't be able to stick to it. Right? But when we recognize our worth, and what this means is we go back and we start changing that lens, right? So instead of seeing all the things that you've done wrong, that one time I made a mistake on a label at work, instead of seeing that, you start to recognize, you start to do an appreciation list, recognizing all the things that you did right? Because our choices of what we focus on is just our choices. We can easily focus on what we are doing right, what we love about ourselves, just as well as what we don't love and what we might have made a mistake on. That choice is ours. And the more that we train our brains, because we're hyper focused on trying to notice what's wrong, because that's how we survived evolutionarily, but we can retrain that. And shifting the lens to what's right means that we start to love ourselves more and that we get to prioritize ourselves more and everything becomes easier, right? We stop beating ourselves up for over these tiny mistakes and we start saying, wow, I'm magnificent. And that was a lesson that I just recently got. That's why I have this picture of Starry Night. So as I started to recognize my self-worth, I began to do a little bit less. I didn't have to work quite so hard. I still worked, don't get me wrong. I still took care of everyone, but it meant I was also on the list, right? I got a little bit of my own time to take care of me. And that made the space to start to listen to my intuition, to start developing my ability to listen to my intuition. It started as a little feeling, like a little bit of peace, and then eventually became like whole conversations. And now I'm doing a quantum healing class, and it was this beautiful message. And it said, you are Starry Night, Juniper style. And first of all, I loved that message and I wanted to share it with all of you. But it's because we are all these beautiful masterpieces, right? Each one of us unique as a fingerprint, each one of us with so many unique talents and special skills and just beauty. Each one of us is our own masterpiece, every single one. And I want you to take that away. And part of going through and finding your worth is looking at your shadows, right? So I always felt like I was too different because my parents grew our food and I lived in a place where people really didn't do that. And so what I took away was, there's nobody else like me on the planet. I guess that's who I am. And I slowly start to shifting that lens again, right? Okay, there's a lot of things like me. Maybe there's no one just like me, as I've just talked about, we're masterpieces, but I certainly can find something in common with many people. And actually, my difference is part of my strength. Right? Nobody else could create this amazing program that blends subconscious work and nutrition and energy healing in just the right way. And so I got to do that. I got to create that. And what a beautiful thing. Another shadow that I had was I felt really socially awkward. I didn't know what to say in social situations. And so I kind of like shut myself down. And what I've come to realize is no, I'm not great in groups. If you see me in a group, sometimes I'll be okay. And sometimes I might look awkward. But what I am really good at is one-to-one connection. Right? So I'll find a person and I'll connect with them deeply. And then I'll find someone else and connect with them deeply. And so instead of beating myself up for what I wasn't, I've actually learned to embrace this amazing skill I have at deep connection one-on-one. And that is the beauty that allows for everything else. So I promise you, the universe wanted you to be a masterpiece. They didn't want you to beat yourself up. In a way, those things are good for us, right? They drive us to do better. But after a while, you will say, okay, I am good enough, right as I am. And let's look at that. Let's find a way to recognize what I have accomplished, what I do offer, and find a more empowering way to go forward.